The conversation around the Knicks right now is some of the dumbest stuff I've ever seen. Because if you watched TNT a couple nights ago, saw Stephen A on First Take, Shams reported it, there's all this talk about how the Knicks aren't good enough as currently constructed to compete for a championship. They're a solid team, but they're not great enough to compete for a championship. Which I, as a Knicks fan, respond, we know! But what everyone else fails to recognize, or at least they just seem to criticize, is the way the Knicks are going about it. Where there's all this criticism about how, why haven't the Knicks acquired the superstar? They're not doing their job. Stephen A was on First Take talking about how, when a team says they're playing the long game, that's just a way for the front office to keep their jobs. Like, what? There was a time this century where the Knicks were constantly laughed at for making the short-sighted moves. They would sign or trade for guys who had that big name so it would look really good on the press release, but whether it was their age or their injuries or their abilities, it just wasn't the right move. But the Knicks just lacked the patience to build something worth building, so they kept making those short-sighted moves and everyone kept laughing at them about it. But now, this team is actually trying to build something. They're trying to take the time to build something over a year's stretch, and they're getting criticized for that too? How? There's definitely going to come a time where if the Knicks haven't traded for a superstar, they are right to be criticized. But I'm telling you right now, that time is not less than 1 year removed from the Knicks' best playoff performance in a decade. We're not the Portland Trailblazers of the 2010s, where they just sort of plateaued as a second-round team. I know they made the conference finals that 1 year, but they were mostly a second-round team. It was very clear they should have blown it up, but they just decided not to because they just kept wanting to make the playoffs. They kept wanting to be relevant. That's not the Knicks. The Knicks haven't flatlined at all. They're building something with the very patience that everyone's criticized them for lacking for the last 2 decades. And even if you do believe, okay, it's time for the Knicks to get a superstar, who is that superstar? Who exactly within the last, let's say, years since they got Jalen Brunson, who is the guy the Knicks didn't trade for, but they should have? It's not like superstars are being passed around. It's not like there's a Black Friday deal on superstars and everyone's getting in on the fun, everyone's making a trade for a superstar, and the Knicks are just waiting on their hands. That's not happening. The only star who you would, in theory, want on the Knicks to come available within the last year is Donovan Mitchell. And I think that by whooping Cleveland's ass in the playoffs, Leon Rose was validated for not making that deal. Other than Mitchell, there's no star who's become available who you would actually want on the Knicks. You want them to go trade for Karl-Anthony Towns? You want them to go trade for Zach LaVine? That's literally the kind of move you would laugh at them for making 15, 20 years ago. It's the guy who has the big name, it's the guy who puts up big numbers, who has the All-Star appearances, but who ultimately will not get the Knicks where they need to go. There's just this insane lack of perspective when it comes to conversations around the Knicks, where if you told me during the bubble that over 3 years later, the Knicks would have made the playoffs 2 of the next 3 years, they would make their first second-round appearance in a decade, they would have an All-NBA forward, an All-Star caliber point guard on one of the best contracts in the NBA, a bunch of insanely good, young, talented players, a bunch of draft assets, cap flexibility, I would say, wow, that's awesome. We're in such a great spot. And that's what I feel right now. Look, if a couple years down the line, the Knicks can't push past the second round, then it'll be okay to criticize them. But we're less than a year removed from the best season this team has seen in 10 years, and yet so many are just criticizing the Knicks, and so many are miserable about the Knicks. There will come that time when if Leon Rose doesn't trade for a superstar, it'll be okay to criticize him, or it'll be okay to pressure him and say, hey dude, maybe this guy might not be the best player on a championship team kind of player, but we don't really have any other options, and this era is sort of running out, so we kind of got to take a swing for the fences, take this risk, and go for it. That's not right now. And I really wish that the fan base and the media would stop acting like it is.